2023 had some banger anime. We had Frieren come out and take hold of the world, grabbing that #1 spot on Mal and throwing it in our faces. Spy X Family had its second season, melting the hearts of the masses. And JJK Brainrot was starting to fully settle into the community. But amongst those series lay an extremely fleshed out and equally amazing story. Something that not enough people of that year talked about. A hidden gem, so to speak. The story of a man who turned into a pig. Heavenly Delusion. But what is it about? Did it actually go unnoticed to the eyes of the mainstream, and does it compete with some of the other big names of that year?
Yes, to all of those.
Heavenly Delusion tells two different intertwining stories, with one surrounding our main protagonists, Kiriko and Maru. The story focuses on events that happen after mankind has gone almost extinct from a phenomenon known as the Great Disaster. It's unknown what exactly transpired for this event to have happened, and while many people have their own theories and speculations, one thing is for sure. There's no going back to the way it was before. The world has gone apocalyptic, people are doing everything they can to survive, yet our main characters remain optimistic, pushing forward with their objective to find Maru's twin. However, by doing this, they slowly peel back the mystery behind what exactly caused the Great Disaster. While doing this, they also give themselves the mission of finding a lead on two missing people of important relevance to Kiriko. I won't go over who exactly these people are in this section, since it's still spoiler-free time, but just know that it's imperative that our duo finds these people, as it ties into the overarching goal of solving the question behind the Great Disaster. Kiriko and Maru have insanely good synergy. They're both competent in what they do, and you know, for the first time, I wasn't getting mad at a main character's decisions. They're smart, they know how to navigate this world, and every move they make is deliberate. Sure, Maru can sometimes flip on the loud equals funny switch, but it isn't entirely surprising, nor is it presented nearly as often in this series. Though he sometimes makes rash decisions, he's not completely stupid. I actually found myself frequently appreciating his antics due to the story being a pretty dark one when you bring it down to its brass tacks. He's a bit more on the naive side of things, but when it comes to putting on his big boy pants, he'll do it without a second thought. Not to mention, he's got his own fair share of moments of wisdom. Kiriko, on the other hand, is all about business. She was hired as a bodyguard for Maru, and honestly, she knows her shit. She's a bit dopey and falls into some of the cliches of how girls are written in anime, but she makes up for it by being a girl boss. She's more than capable of surviving in this world, and has her own secrets and fleshed out motivations. So yeah, you can think of this side of the story as an anime version of The Last of Us. Over the course of the series, we see this friendship grow, and despite it sometimes feeling a bit more on the tropey side of things, I personally don't mind seeing as those tropes aren't executed terribly. On the other hand, we've got school. And this is where we meet our other set of main characters, Kona and Tokyo. They study in a very contained environment with huge walls and a dome that separates them from the outside. They've lived their entire lives accepting this as a reality, until Tokyo is asked the question, would you like to go outside of the outside? Going through this series, we see Tokyo and her classmates develop a curiosity for the world beyond what they can see. It's got that trope of not everything is as it seems, but done right. Think The Promised Neverland, but only at season 1. Each of these children seem to possess some sort of unique ability, whether it be super reflexes and stamina or being a frog. It separates them with each of their quirks being a core part of their character. But in Maru and Kiriko's world, these types of abilities aren't nearly as common. Both of these stories are done extremely well, and as we go through the series, events in the story slowly but surely begin to click, with the growing feelings of unease amplifying. The way that the anime is paced has it so that you're never feeling like you're in a lull. There's always something interesting going on, and the parts of the story that can be cut out, like the mundane activities of basic survival or just going through the daily motions of class, are filled in with a switch to the other side, where there's always something intriguing going on. But enough about that, let's go over the art. Holy motherfucking ravioli, this shit is good. Each shot is amazing. The shading is just mwah. And the animation? The animation? Every scene has been drawn to perfection. There wasn't a single time where I thought to myself, ew. I'm telling you, I was going ooh the entire time. Literally just look at these scenes. I don't even need to say anything else to sell it. You've been seeing clips like this the entire time. The music is solid, like really solid. Kensuke Ushio, the composer for Chainsaw Man, A Silent Voice, and Devilman Crybaby's OST made this, so yeah, iconic. The soundtrack can easily blend between all kinds of emotions, and the soft piano that's prevalent in the other series I mentioned is also here. It very obviously has a level of care to it. Typically, when you hear a well-renowned composer was involved in a soundtrack, you already have high expectations. For example, Marty O'Donnell's Halo soundtrack. I knew he was good already, so him making Destiny's soundtrack gave me high expectations that were ultimately met, if not exceeded. So once I saw Ushio's name on the OST, I already knew it was going to be at least pretty solid considering his track record. Now, is it beating Made in Abyss's OST? Well, no, but it's definitely in a different tier when compared to the rest of the industry's pieces. When compared to his other pieces though, I still think he's done better. My favorite track from this album though has got to be Tragedy. Those faint notes that flicker in and out are gorgeous and tell a story on their own, which is one of the elements that made Made in Abyss's OST stand out to me. But if the show is as amazing as you say it is, then why is the video titled Near Perfect? Well, if you've watched the show and you're here, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But to the people who are just here to get an anime recommendation, I'll touch on it in the disclaimer right now. If you plan on watching this show, it is not family friendly, like at all. There are elements of nudity, taking one's life, and the R word, the one that sounds like grape. So if these disturb you, do not watch this show. Going forward, there will be spoilers, so if you're looking for something that has a unique take on an exhausted trope, alongside amazing art, this is a great show. The world building is pretty strong, the characters are great, and the pacing is near perfect. What more could you really ask for? Also, before you go, make sure to subscribe. I just started my career not too long ago, and once I hit 10,000 subscribers, I will be streaming on Twitch so that I can siphon more money out of your wallets. What can I say, I'm a capitalist pig. Anyways, without further ado, let's go over Season 1. And the only season. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that we have a structure to these, which goes over the plot points that I find relevant, a bit of a character analysis, and then I do a bit of griping. The first scene we get is of children enjoying their time at a school. This place is called Heaven, and it's a place completely secluded from the rest of the world. The entire place is extremely futuristic. It's covered in bright colors, with white being the primary tone, and everyone seems to get along just well. But despite all that, something feels off. When something is perfect, the cracks are always more noticeable. This is especially prevalent in the school, where its deformities are painfully obvious, with its overt cleanliness and perfect nature being a part of them. I mean, it's a school and kids are natural mess makers. Come on now, you're not fooling anyone. Blah blah blah, Tokyo's test glitches out and she sees the question that would challenge her perspective on everything she knows. Do you want to go outside of the outside? Even now, we have no concrete evidence on who or what exactly sent this message. All we know is that it has an ulterior motive and that it confirms any forms of suspicion that we or the cast already had.
Also, I just noticed this right now, so excuse the funny microphone, but Minihime is staring at Asura in this scene right here. Oh my god!
And just as quickly as we adjust to this world, we're immediately thrown into the complete opposite setting. A place where buildings are ruined and the blue sky hangs over our heads. A place where technology is scarce and the world is dangerous, but also free to explore. Kiriko and Maru traverse this land with a sort of happy-go-lucky mentality despite the desolate view in sight, with both sides of this story showcasing a different sort of optimism from our main casts. On one hand, you have the school, with its artificially engineered utopia. It's designed to keep the children cheerful. It gives them the false idea of joy and coercively shoves the feelings of happiness onto them. While they may be perceivably joyful, they're caged birds, not truly living, and as such, they can never actually experience what it means to live. On the other hand, Kiriko and Maru's existence is one of fighting for survival. Every journey is an uphill battle, so they celebrate the little wins as they go forward, and while they may be living life to the fullest, they're still at risk of being wiped off the surface of the earth at any second by the man-eaters. Yikes. Kiriko and Maru's relationship throughout this show is rocky to say the least. They may have great synergy and ultimately they have each other's backs, but they also have their own problems, which can unfortunately be a burden to the other. Maru's pretty insecure. He takes every word that Kiriko says to heart and has trouble communicating when he's been hurt, opting to just sleep it off and move on with his day. Over time, we'd see how this ends up being an issue for these two, but we'd also see how Kiriko ends up being an anchor for him, with his strengths being further amplified by her. Maru might be the powerhouse and the character tied between these two stories the most, but even so, he's got a lot of work to do on himself. Kiriko, like I mentioned before, is a lot more confident in her abilities. Now, she has self-doubt too, but it's a lot more hidden than Maru's. These two help sharpen each other, mentally strengthening and being a form of happiness to one another. But the reasoning behind Kiriko's self-doubt goes far deeper than Maru's being simply his inexperience. Kiriko, or for this part I'll call them Haruki, has spent a good chunk of their life in someone else's body. I mean, they literally kenjaku'd into that shit. Not like they had a choice. Understanding where Haruki came from, he's always been the one being told to sit back, letting the grown-ups handle the issues that involve more punch fighting, and so he's grown accustomed to the idea that he's somewhat useless. Not only that, but the reason he's in his sister's body is because of a mistake he made where he put himself into a powerless situation to begin with. His entire existence at this point in the story is the result of his inadequacy. So being told by Maru that he's actually useful, that he's talented at what he does, and that maybe, just maybe, making that crossbow way back then to practice his sharpshooting wasn't the worst idea, helps propel him forward. It gives him the confidence he so desperately needs. As for the main antagonist on this side of the story, there really isn't one. You could make a case for Robin being the main antagonist as a twist villain, but to me, what these two fight for the most part are their own mental struggles and the environment around them. They have a goal, and nobody's really trying to stop them from reaching it, so to build conflict, the author uses their surroundings and the man-eaters against them. The same, however, cannot be said for the other side of the story involving Heaven. But before we get into that, let's talk about Heaven's protagonists. These two, as far as we're concerned, are the main characters for this plot. Kona's a lot more kept to himself and is an artist, preferring to spend more time in solitude with his drawings rather than with other people. As far as we're concerned, his powers revolve around predicting the future via his drawings, which is solidified by him giving a drawing of a baby to Tokyo and a picture of a fish with arms to Cuckoo, which matches what the man-eater in the future looks like. A lot of his mental struggles revolve around the death of Asuda, but other than that, we don't really have much to go off of here. Maybe I'm not looking into it enough, but Kona just wasn't that interesting to me. He's kinda bland and I found myself more interested in Asuda than him. I just wish we could have gone a bit deeper into the relationship between the two of them instead, seeing as we got basically nothing on that front. By the way, Asuda's got to be one of the most intriguing characters in the story right now. She looks wildly different from the rest of the cast, is said to have had superior intellect to just about everyone else, and her death was apparently to serve a greater purpose. Not to mention she had some other ridiculous powers that eclipse just about everyone else's. I mean, right off the bat, she's got healing, intellect, flying, and potentially even future sight too, which I can definitely see being a problem if she turned into a man-eater, seeing as these traits are further amplified in those forms. There's basically nothing known about her, and even after her death, she was seen flying across the world, which is just eerie. I'm more than excited to see how she evolves and her continued involvement in the story, but man, season 1 just left me with so many damn questions. And then we got Tokyo. She starts off by questioning why everyone around her is acting stranger than before, in that the kids are starting to garner feelings for each other, and then she develops feelings for Kona. Kona proceeds to reassure her that it's normal, which is mostly due to the fact that he had the same feelings for Asuda, before confessing that he feels the same towards her. Not gonna lie, Kona, you're freaky. What the f is this? You like that? But in this academy, the kids aren't supposed to know or feel these kinds of things. This would all lead to Tokyo giving birth to twins, one being Maru with some heavy evidence surrounding it that basically all but confirms their suspicions. The thing I like about this series is that it guides you to the answers. It doesn't blatantly say it to your face. It's obvious what the answers to many of the mysteries in the series are, but Ishiguro has mastered the art of showing and not telling. This also makes it even more enjoyable on a second watch through, when you have already acquired all the clues necessary to have better context for every action prior to reveals. Now, as for what happened to Tokyo after the disaster at the academy, we don't know, but from what we can tell from her final moments in the show, she was the first student to become a man-eater. I'm speculating here. I have no idea. But let's talk about the main antagonist of this series, at least as far as we're concerned. Target! Here we are with yet another AI versus the world plot. Mina, the AI in charge of the school, is just creepy. There's really no other way to put it. Even after watching the show, we don't know what Mina is after, why they're creating man-eaters, and if they're even still around. All we can really speculate on is that they manipulated the academy and should be the antagonist. I refuse to believe that this thing isn't. On the second watch through, every move that the characters at the academy makes feels purposeful, like Mina has been orchestrating it all. I mean, they literally know exactly what's happening at all times, from the security cameras stopping at convenient times, to the alarm sounding right when Tokyo visited the incubator room to save her from being caught, to the kids developing feelings for each other. It feels like everything is being manipulated to serve a greater purpose, one we still don't know. More than likely, they're the key reason behind the great disaster. We see when Tokyo and Cuckoo find the incubation room that there are baby man-eaters. On our first watch through, we might think that these babies aren't actually the ones that they're looking for. But upon our second watch through, we realize that these are the same species as the students, and that Mina wanted Tokyo to see these babies to test whether she had the motherly instincts that other creatures have. They wanted Tokyo to have children, to experiment on her, and see what would happen if these man-made creatures procreated. But that's just a theory. Continuing onwards though, we actually see how these two stories tie in together, with Shiro and Mimihime actually meeting Kiruko and Maru. This entire arc feels so much more different on another watch through. There's a feeling of bittersweetness in the air that wasn't present during the moments that it happened on the first watch. For example, the death of Oma. During the fight between her, Kiruko, and Maru, we understand the fear that Kiruko experienced. That grim feeling is present during that brutal scene only because we don't know who they're fighting. But once we know who it was that was killed, it feels a lot more depressing in retrospect, confirming that the children of the school are actually the monsters that our main group have been eradicating. Meeting Mimihime on my second watch through felt a lot more tragic than before. The fact that she stares at Maru with a sense of familiarity could be because she's seen him before in her visions when looking at Tokyo, or maybe even takes notice of the resemblance between the two. There's a melancholic feel to it all, with the stories being tied but nobody really knowing it. And before Mimihime passes on, she asks to see the sky once more, which was one of the first things she noticed after going outside for the first time. Once Maru ends her life, we see her final messages to Shiro, and fuck, this shit was painful. We've seen these two as kids. The way their story progressed after they left the academy was very obviously full of pitfalls and immense amounts of suffering. So to see it all end like this without them even knowing that the people right in front of them are trying to save the world and are almost certainly a part of Asuda's unknown plan, it just made me feel hollow.
in a good way.
Seeing Maru's reaction to having to kill Mimihime and then blaming himself for the death of Shido right after makes perfect sense. These two were practically innocent and obviously had the answers to many of the questions Kiriko was looking for. So to get so close to a perfect lead, only for them to die right before they could ask, would obviously fuck up anyone. It's also a main contributor to why Kiriko stops Maru in that scene. He very obviously is suffering a lot with his identity at this point. He has no idea why or what he's even been born for, and has been tasked to do a practically impossible mission, whilst also being born with a gift that lets him crush the souls of humans, or so I'm theorizing based on how he could kill Totori. So yeah, when you tally it all up, he's got it pretty rough. But wait, if these two didn't turn into man-eaters, then are there others that didn't? We still have yet to find the answer behind that question, but if I had to guess, it's more than likely that there are still a few out there with the answers we need. This arc in the end wasn't pointless. Through this endeavor, they were able to confirm that Robin is still alive, which brings me to the next topic. I fucking hate Robin. Everything about this arc was just gross. Robin's first look at Kiriko was the first sign that something was wrong, and then he seemed a bit too friendly right off the bat even after giving that look. He's been living in the boonies for the past couple years. You'd think he'd have changed a little bit, but he just seemed to be his usual self. Time and trauma changes people, but it wasn't apparent at all when we first met him, which is already strange. And then what he does to Kiriko, or rather Haruki, is just like, I can't express how fucked up this is. Whether Haruki is actually in charge of Kiriko's body or not isn't something that is necessarily important in the environment that they're in. This is just something that Robin wanted to do to satisfy his own sick desires. It doesn't matter whose soul is in that body. The reality is that Robin is committing terrible acts on a person who, in Robin's own mind, has completely lost their sense of self. The fact that the entire first season's mission was centered around finding one of these leads made it all the more painful when this happened. They went through a whole lot of bullshit only to be met with not only a dead end, but the soul-crushing realization that the man that Haruki looked up to this whole time was just a sick, degenerate piece of shit. So many sacrifices were made only for them to realize that it was all for nothing. Maru and Kiriko's conversation was something that I felt was executed pretty well. Maru's not a therapist, he's a child with a bare understanding of feelings, and while him saying it with the pretense of, I'm in love with you because of this, can make it sound more about his own feelings on the matter, I still think that in the context of what Kiriko's going through right now, it works. They've just been used for their sister's body, and there's a lot of internal struggle going on as to who they actually are. Maru reaffirming that they're their own person despite what just occurred is important for the healing process. Maru might still be immature and direct when regarding his feelings, but in this moment, I'd say he did the best he could with what he had. However, I don't think that the show actually presented the process of moving on in the most sensible way. I understand that they need to push forward. This world is dangerous and stopping for even a second comes at great risks, as we've seen throughout the show. But seeing Kiriko happy and go lucky right after, with them perceivably going back to their old witty self, just didn't sit well with me. It felt like we had moved on a bit too quickly, but then again, everyone has different coping mechanisms, and if I had to guess, this will almost certainly mess with their brain during future events. The biggest problem to me with this section was that it ended right after that. Had I seen some of the repercussions that came with being a victim of such a horrific crime in the final shot, with something similar to maybe like Cyberpunk Edge Runner's stair scene, it would have been a lot more obvious that this experience would affect Kiriko forever. Anyways, Robin gets away with the ending showing that Robin had kept a man-eater in one of his rooms, which just generates so many questions. I need season 2, the manga just won't hit the same after seeing that art. 9.5 out of 10. This shit cooks. The story is actually really solid. The art is some of the best I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing, and the world building was amazing. The only gripe I have is the way that the ending was handled. It was just really tone deaf and should have explored the lingering horrors that come with that atrocity more. Here's hoping that it gets addressed further in the future. All I can really say is I'm really excited to see its second season. Well, never mind. Subscribe and watch my other videos if you haven't already. Just make sure you slow down the first two by like 25%. I may or may not have been a bit wired on caffeine for those ones.